Hi, Happy New Year. For my first video of the year, I'm really excited because I just received the Grackle Chat palette from Titanium Foxes, which I won in a giveaway from a collab hosted by Leah Evangelista and sponsored by the brand Titanium Foxes. I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity to try this palette. I'd been wanting to try the brand for quite some time, but they are based in France and I'm in Canada, and I've just had some issues before with international shipping. Plus, customs fees can be absolutely brutal and often a total surprise. It's hard to get them calculated accurately. So I hadn't bought any yet, but after this experience, I'm definitely going to pick up the bundle of their other two palettes. This brand and this palette are just such true artist palettes. As you can see, it has a beautiful packaging, and then when I open it up, you'll see this stunning color story. Clara, the owner of the brand, describes this as being a fall into winter palette inspired by seeing grackles out on your porch or a walk while you're sipping your tea or your coffee. She really is just a true artist in all regards. This is such an elegant palette. The palette has 8 shimmers in 3 different formulas and 7 mattes. 6 of the shimmers are multichromes, and the other 2 include a duochrome and a sparkly topper. I'll go over a little bit more detail of the shimmer formulas as I swatch them out, but overall it is a creamier formula, not a oily, smooshy formula, just a really nice creamy formula. Some of the shimmers are quite flaky, the other ones are much more smooth. The only thing that I would say is that when you're using them, you want to make sure you're layering them over a drier primer or a matte. Otherwise, they can kind of like stick to themselves as you layer it up. But as long as you do that, you can get a very beautiful opaque layer. And though the shimmers are gorgeous, the real standout here is the mattes. These mats are an absolute work of art. I've seen a few people say that they think this palette is too deep, that it doesn't have enough lighter shades. But with the formula that these mats are, you don't need a lighter shade because these can be sheared out beautifully. One thing that is often a problem with mattes is that the color in the pan and the color that is built up to full opacity and the color that it blends out to be are all different colors. That is not the case with the mattes here. The color that you see in the pan is the color you get on the eye, and the color you apply and pack onto the eye is the color that it blends out to be as well. This is an absolutely stunning matte formula, and when I swatch them, I'm actually going to swatch it with half of the swatch built up to full opacity and the rest of the swatch more blended out so that you can really see that effect. Anyways, without further ado, here are the swatches. The first shade in the palette is called Flashing Feathers. It is a smooth black-based multichrome that shifts from a teal, blue, indigo, purple, pink, and gold. There are a few jeweled multichromes in this palette, and this one I feel has the deepest, blackest base of them all. It's extremely shifty, but it still has a really nice texture with some sparkle to it. The next shade in the palette is called River Ground, and it is a navy blue. As I mentioned before, I'm going to be doing these matte swatches where I build up one side of it to full opacity and then blend out the rest so that you can see the versatility of them. As you can see, it really does blend out true to color. It doesn't turn into something that is more of a blue or more of an indigo or loses any of the kind of undertone to it. It's not patchy. It's just I can't say enough good things about this matte formula. The next shade in the palette is called Crawling Light. It has a cerulean blue base and shifts magenta, pink, peach, orange, gold, and lime. This is the first of the flaky multichromes in the palette, and although it is a very flaky, very sparkly formula, it can be smoothed out quite easily. A lot of times people shy away from more flaky formulas because they can be a bit more difficult to work with, but this one, very, very easy to work with. It did smooth out very easily. I didn't need to like buff it in or anything, just ran my finger over it once. So if you're someone that's a little bit hesitant to use these really sparkly, super shiny, high impact flaky shades, this is a really good formula to start with. The next shade in the palette is called See You Tomorrow, and it is a matte black. This to me is the perfect example of how high quality the mattes are in this palette. Matte blacks are notoriously difficult to formulate, and not only is this a fantastic formulation, but the color is fantastic. Often when someone makes a black, they have a bit of an undertone to it, and that can be a good thing. This one has a bit of a warm undertone to it, but with that undertone, when you blend it out, you sometimes lose the black and it turns into like a blue or a green or a brown. That doesn't happen with this shade. It blends out into a gray, albeit a gray with a bit of a warm undertone because that's the undertone of the black, but it never becomes a brown. It stays true to color, and that is incredible. The next shade in the palette is called Frozen Moss. It is a black-based olive with a gold to green duochrome shift. It has a beautiful satin finish, and by a satin finish, I mean an actual satin finish, not just a low-quality shimmer finish. It's very opaque, however, you can sheer it out a little bit more, and I really love to take it to layer some of these sparkly multi-chromes on top. The next shade in the palette is called Evening Sunbath. It's a jeweled multi-chrome that shifts red, orange, and gold. It has the same smooth, shiny, metallic finish as most of the other shimmers in the palette. The next shade in the palette is called Winter Blood, which is a deep plum matte. I feel like I didn't go sheer enough on the sheer side of this to show you how light it can actually be, but if you look at like right nearby my thumb, you can kind of see it a little bit more sheer than the rest of the hand. Next up is the shade Riverbank, which is a beautiful tan beige matte. This is another one that is a perfect example of how fantastic the formulation on these shadows are. Usually shades like this are one color in the pan and a completely different color on the eye, and then even more of a completely different color when blended out. A rosy pink color, or they tend to go orange or more into a brown tone, but you never get, which is really unfortunate because this color is the perfect contour color and transition color for someone with skin like mine. So I'm really, really excited I have this in this palette because I'm going to use this shade all the time to get an actual contour color that I know will actually look like the color I'm looking at on my eye. Next is the shade Sleeping Tree, which is a pecan brown matte. This is a really beautiful shadow, and I suspect it fills a very similar capacity for deeper skin tones as the previous shade did for someone with fair skin tones like mine. The next shade in the palette is called Dripping Feathers. It's a black-based jeweled multichrome with a pink, peach, orange, gold, and chartreuse shift. This is the second shade in the palette that has the flakier formula, but is a much easier to work with flakier formula that smooths out very easily. There's kind of a cool surprise with this. As you can see, there's a bit of a purple sparkle in this. I can only get that in certain lights, and I had to really mess around with my lighting to get it. I don't think that was intentional. I think it's just kind of a trick of the shadows. Somehow they interact to create that under really specific circumstances. So please don't go buying this shadow expecting it to look like that all the time, but it's really cool when you do get that effect. The next shade in the palette is called Ice Window. It has a deep blue base and shifts blue, indigo, purple, and pink. It has the smooth, high shine metallic finish like most of the other shimmers in the palette. And although it's not very shifty in comparison to some of the other ones because it doesn't have that contrasting base, it is extremely impactful with that super vibrant blue. The next shade is Wet Moss, and it is a mossy green matte. The next shade in the palette is called Sparkling Snow. Now, there was a bit of a mess up in the production. The shade that I'm showing you here is actually supposed to be in the spot that the next shade is in. So we're going to just describe them as they are in the palette, but be aware it was supposed to be the other way around, and I'm not sure if subsequent editions of the palette are going to have that fixed. Anyways, this shade is a beautiful soft tangerine orange, which can be built up to something quite vibrant or sheared out to something that's a little bit more of a warm tone neutral. The next shade in my palette is called Squirrel. Again, the two shades are mixed up, so this in reality would be Sparkling Snow, and the previous shade is actually Squirrel. This is a beautiful sparkly white topper. It has a really versatile formula. You can build it up to something that's relatively opaque or just put a kind of light layer for a soft sparkle. I've seen quite a few people say they like to use shades like this as an inner corner highlight. Personally, I don't really like my inner corner to be super sparkly, so I prefer to just use something like this to add a bit of sparkle on top of other shades. But it is stunning. I love having this wet look kind of shimmer that isn't a turquoise or a blue. It's just a beautiful silvery white. It will go with everything. And I found layering it over deeper shades didn't turn them into more gray. It just added that silvery white sparkle, which is really nice. And the last shadow in the palette is called Grackle Stare. It's a black-based jeweled multichrome which shifts from orange, gold, antique gold, green, and teal. This has the same finish and formula as the other black-based multichromes in the palette. And here's the palette all swatched out. I will give you all a moment to take a look at it in all of its glory. All right, and that's it. Thank you for watching. And again, thank you to Leah and Clara from Titanium Boxes for giving me the opportunity to try this palette. I absolutely love it, and I'm definitely going to be picking up the Poppy bundle as soon as possible so that I can try the rest of the palettes from Titanium Boxes. A standout formula. I'm absolutely blown away. I already knew I was going to love it to a certain extent because of the creativity behind the brand and the gorgeous color story. It's just such a elegant, passionate, well thought out brand, and I love everything about it. I can't wait to try more. Again, thank you for watching. Bye.